My name is Barbara, and I didn't think my family would become strangers over a dinner conversation. If someone had told me the night would end with me quietly erasing myself from their plans, I would have laughed. Not because we were close, but because I had spent my entire life believing that loyalty, generosity, and patience eventually counted for something. I believed if you kept showing up, kept helping, kept paying when things got uncomfortable, you earned your place. That Friday night felt different in a way that made me hopeful. The air was warm, the kind of evening that makes you think something good is coming. I pulled into my parents' driveway with a bottle of wine and a smile I didn't even realize I was wearing. It had been a long time since I showed up without an obligation attached. No problem to fix, no bill to cover. Just dinner, like old times. 3 weeks earlier, I had received a promotion that quietly changed my entire financial bracket. New title, new salary, a number that made me sit back in my chair and stare at the screen longer than I should have. I didn't tell my family right away. I wanted it to mean something. I wanted to turn it into gratitude instead of noise. I wanted them to feel included in something good for once. So I planned a trip to Italy. Florence, Rome, Venice, first-class flights, 5-star hotels. Every detail thought through. I paid for everything myself, every ticket, every reservation, every transfer. I told myself it was worth the dent in my savings because they were my family. That's what you do, for family. When I finally told them at dinner, I expected surprise, maybe tears, maybe pride, gratitude at the very least. What I got instead was something colder. My mother gave a tight half smile and said, "That's generous of you," like she was commenting on a charity donation. My sister immediately asked if she could bring her friend Mia. My father raised his eyebrows, like he was doing math in his head. And my brother poured himself another glass of wine and said something that shifted the entire room. "Just make sure you're not around when we leave for Italy," he said. "It would be awkward if you tried to tag along." I waited for him to smile. I waited for the joke to land. It didn't. My mother didn't flinch. She nodded like this had already been discussed. She said the trip was about them, that I had my own life now, and while that was great, it wasn't really my place anymore. My sister was already scrolling through her phone, showing my mom pictures of swimsuits she wanted to wear on the coast. She never looked at me. I stared at all of them, realizing something quietly devastating. They weren't embarrassed. They weren't conflicted. This wasn't impulsive. They had already decided I was the one paying for the experience, not part of it. I raised my glass and said one word. "Understood." I said it calmly. I even smiled. They clinked their glasses with mine. My dad laughed and started talking about gelato flavors like nothing had happened. They had no idea what that word actually meant. That night, I went back to my apartment and sat at my desk in silence. The flight confirmation emails were still sitting in my inbox. One by one, I opened them, logged into the airline website, and canceled everything. Every ticket, every hotel, the car service waiting to pick them up. Gone. It took 15 minutes. I didn't cry. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. The next morning, no one called me. No one checked in. They kept talking in the group chat about packing and customs like nothing had changed. No apology, no hesitation. They really believed they could use me and erase me at the same time. That was when I knew this wasn't about revenge. This was about closure, and they weren't ready for it. 2 days later, they showed up at the airport dressed like this was the beginning of a highlight reel. I know because my sister posted a selfie in front of the terminal, sunglasses on, passport out, brand new luggage lined up behind her. The caption read, "Ciao, baby." I was standing in my kitchen pouring my second cup of coffee when my phone lit up, and for a moment I just stared at it, already knowing what was coming. The first text was from my sister, "Fix this now." I didn't answer. I set my phone face down on the counter and let the coffee finish pouring, listening to the hum of the machine like it was grounding me. A minute later, another message came through. "Why are our tickets canceled?" Then another. "They said you did this." My brother followed right after. "Barbara, are you serious right now?" I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I opened the airline app and watched the situation unfold in real time. 4 tickets, all voided, all non-refundable, a red X beside every name. They tried to check in online. Denied. They went to the counter. Denied again. I imagined the confusion on their faces, the way entitlement turns into panic when it finally meets a locked door. That was the feeling I wanted them to sit with, the same one I felt at that dinner table when they decided I wasn't part of the trip I paid for. The family group chat exploded. My dad asked what was happening. My sister said they wouldn't let them board. My brother demanded I undo it immediately. My mother told me to call right now, that this wasn't funny. I waited. I let the messages stack up, let the anger build, let them spiral without me stepping in to fix it like I always had before. Then I sent one message, just one. It's just not your place anymore. For a full minute, there was nothing. Silence. And then everything hit at once. My sister was the loudest. She sent message after message, blaming me for ruining her year, saying she bought new outfits and booked hair appointments just for this trip. She called me cruel, selfish, manipulative. Then she switched tactics, asking how I could do this to my own family, like blood alone erased everything that happened at that table. My brother went straight to threats, the same half-baked lines he always used when he felt cornered. He said I owed them for starting this in the first place, that I baited them with generosity just to humiliate them. My mother accused me of planning it from the beginning, of weaponizing kindness, of being sick for doing it this way. Around noon, my dad called. I let it ring twice. On the third ring, I picked up. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't ask why. He said, "You embarrassed us." He said I made them look like fools at an international check-in counter. He asked if I thought that was funny. I didn't answer. I just hung up. That was when something settled inside me. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Not one of them said they were wrong. Not one of them apologized. They weren't hurt. They were exposed. That afternoon, I logged into my bank account. My sister had a standing transfer set up, $11,300 a month. She used it for her nanny, groceries, whatever she needed. I canceled it. Then I shut down the card she had linked to my account. She had used it the week before to order $200 worth of bath products. I remembered noticing the charge and letting it go without a second thought. That version of me was gone. Next, I called the dealership. The white SUV sitting in my parents' driveway was under my name. I gave them the address and told them to retrieve it. By 3 p.m, it was gone. By 5, I called my brother's landlord. The lease was in my name. He hadn't paid rent in over half a year. I told them I was stepping out of the agreement. They had 30 days to deal with him directly. That night, the group chat tried again. My mother asked us to be rational. My sister said please and admitted she had no way to pay the nanny now. My brother said he would figure it out, but what I did was messed up. There were still no apologies, no accountability, just panic. They thought I was still the version of me who needed them, the one who bought connection and silence with money. By the next morning, the anger turned into desperation. At 8:12, there was banging at my front door. I didn't need to look through the peephole. I already knew my sister's voice. She was yelling my name like it was an emergency, like she was about to fall apart. I stood in my kitchen sipping coffee and listened while she shouted that this wasn't fair, that you don't just cut people off, that this isn't how things work. She banged again, then went quiet. I watched her from the window as she stormed out, got into her car, and sat there typing furiously on her phone. A minute later, my screen lit up again. She told me the nanny quit that morning, said she couldn't rely on a paycheck that might vanish. She said she was stuck with everything now. Then she sent another message asking if I really did all of this over one dinner conversation. The last message said I needed help. I didn't respond. I logged into my bank one more time and checked. Transfers canceled. Card disabled. Everything exactly where I left it. She wasn't bluffing about the nanny. I had no doubt the woman walked away. She probably recognized instability when she saw it and chose not to be caught in the middle. Smart woman. They still thought this was temporary. A tantrum. Something I would eventually apologize for. What they didn't understand yet was that this wasn't anger. This was clarity. They made it clear I wasn't part of their circle anymore, just the one who paid for it. So I took myself out of the equation completely. And what came next was up to them. The silence that followed should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt staged. 3 full days passed without a single message. No angry voicemail. No guilt-laced paragraph from my mother. No late-night threat from my brother. After everything that had exploded at the airport and collapsed financially, the quiet didn't feel like acceptance. It felt like regrouping. I knew my family well enough to recognize the pause before a counterattack. Thursday morning, just after 10, my phone rang with a number I recognized instantly. Human Resources. The calm, professional tone on the other end asked if I had a moment to discuss a complaint that had been submitted. That single word, complaint, tightened my chest for half a second. I stepped into a conference room and asked what this was about. They told me an anonymous tip had come through the company ethics portal. Someone claimed I had misused company funds to pay for a personal family vacation, falsified expense reports, and used corporate reimbursements to cover personal favors. There were attachments, fake invoices, screenshots, even a fabricated memo referencing the Italy trip as an executive retreat. I knew immediately who it was. They had taken their humiliation and turned it into sabotage. HR said the documents looked suspicious. Names misspelled, formatting off, dates that didn't line up. They told me they'd open a formal review, but someone was already cross-checking every expense I had ever filed. I didn't panic because I knew the truth. I never charged a single Italy expense to the company. Everything came from my own account. By 3 p.m, they cleared me completely. No violations, no warnings, no record. But the damage they wanted wasn't disciplinary. It was fear. It was reputation. They were trying to poison something I built on my own, quietly and systematically. I didn't call anyone. I didn't argue. I sent one text to my sister. Solid attempt. Try spelling the VP's name right next time. She replied 10 minutes later, saying she had no idea what I was talking about. Then followed it with, "You always think everyone's out to get you. That's not healthy." The final message told me to let her know when I was ready to act like a grown-up. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because the audacity was almost impressive. That evening, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I found a woman I didn't recognize. Late 30s, exhausted eyes, holding a small boy on her hip and a canvas bag over her shoulder. She asked if I was Barbara. I nodded. She introduced herself as Clara and said she used to work for my sister, the nanny. She apologized for showing up unannounced and said she thought I should see something before it disappeared. Then she handed me a flash drive. She told me she was quitting, that things in that house had become toxic. She said she didn't want to get involved, but she had saved the files just in case. I offered her money. She refused. As she turned to leave, she looked back at me and said quietly, "She lied to you a lot." I closed the door, plugged the drive into my laptop, and opened the folder. It was worse than I imagined. There were audio recordings of my sister talking to friends and my mother, laughing, mocking, calling me a glorified ATM, saying things like, "She'll always pay if you throw in a guilt trip." One clip had her explaining how she manipulated me into believing the Italy trip was a family celebration, when really it was their reward for dealing with my so-called attitude. My mother's voice appeared more than once, agreeing, telling her not to worry because I never had a spine. There were screenshots of group chats I wasn't in, photos of my apartment taken secretly when my sister visited, captioned with jokes about me paying rent for everyone. There was even a draft email they almost sent to my boss weeks earlier, accusing me of workplace harassment. My name typed over and over again in places it didn't belong. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I copied everything to an encrypted drive. I didn't send the files. I didn't threaten anyone. I sat with it until midnight, letting the reality settle into my bones. That's when I sent my sister one final message. "I know everything. Good luck." She didn't reply. My mother did at 1:43 in the morning. 2 words. "Please stop." The tone had changed. They tried using me, then guilt, then threats, then sabotage. Now they were scared, and I hadn't even started. After that night, something shifted. The silence that followed wasn't loud anymore. It was cautious, calculated, like everyone had suddenly realized the ground beneath them wasn't solid, and any wrong step could make things worse. For the first time, I wasn't reacting to their chaos. They were reacting to my stillness. My sister disappeared completely for a week. No sarcastic texts, no fake concern, no dramatic apologies. That kind of silence from her wasn't peace. It was survival mode. She was hiding, trying to figure out what I knew, who I had told, and how much damage was already done. The only one who kept reaching out was my mother, sending vague messages every few days. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." "I don't recognize you anymore." I didn't answer any of them. Then even my mother stopped. That was when I realized she must have seen what was on that flash drive. Whether my sister showed her or Clara shared it herself, I don't know. But once my mother understood that I had proof, not just accusations, the rules changed. Guilt didn't work anymore. Neither did denial. Silence was safer. My father never reached out at all. No calls, no texts, not even a passive-aggressive article forwarded like he used to do when he wanted to make a point without saying it out loud. He sealed himself off the way he always did when embarrassment crept too close. If he didn't acknowledge it, maybe it didn't exist. My brother was the last one to make a move. It came in the form of legal paperwork. A thin envelope showed up in my mailbox with his name scrawled across the front. Inside was a handwritten claim for emotional distress. He said I had caused him housing instability by pulling out of the lease. He said I owed him 6 months of future rent as compensation for trauma. The handwriting was uneven, the logic barely there. It was so absurd I actually laughed out loud while reading it. I didn't respond. I let him file it. It was thrown out almost immediately. A few days later, he showed up outside my building. I didn't open the door. I watched from my window as he paced the sidewalk, yelling into his phone, gesturing wildly like he was arguing with someone who wasn't there. For a moment, he looked up and saw me. Our eyes met through the glass. There was something unfamiliar on his face then. Not anger, not entitlement, confusion. Like he was finally realizing the version of me he relied on didn't exist anymore. He turned and walked away. That same night, my sister cracked. She sent a long message, messy and emotional, saying she was sorry. She said she made mistakes. She said she missed me and didn't mean what she said at dinner. She reminded me I had always been the strong one and asked if we could meet, just to talk. The words were soft, but they rang hollow. There was no mention of the lies, no mention of the sabotage, no mention of the recordings. I didn't reply. Instead, I scheduled a meeting with my lawyer. I had been thinking about it for a while. The car still under my name, the accounts my parents quietly relied on, the property taxes I had been covering for 2 years without anyone acknowledging it. That all ended. Letters were sent, documents filed, power of attorney privileges my father didn't even remember having were revoked. Every joint detail I had ever shared with any of them was reviewed, closed, or transferred. Bit by bit, I erased myself from their systems, and in doing so, I watched them scramble to figure out how much of their lives had been built on the assumption that I would always be there. What surprised me wasn't their anger, it was their fear. They weren't furious because they lost me emotionally. They were terrified because they lost access. They were staring at a version of me they had never known. One who didn't argue, one who didn't explain, one who didn't hope they would change. And by then, they finally understood something I had known for a while. There was no coming back from this. It's been just over 3 months since everything ended, and that's the part people don't understand when they hear a story like this. They expect a final explosion, a dramatic apology, a confrontation in a parking lot, or a tearful reconciliation over coffee. They expect noise. What actually came was silence. Not all at once, but slowly, like a room emptying out after a long, exhausting argument. At first, I kept checking my phone out of habit. I would pick it up expecting another angry voicemail from my brother, another guilt-soaked message from my mother, another long paragraph from my sister pretending accountability without actually taking it. But nothing came. Days passed, then weeks. The noise I had lived with for years began to fade, and I realized how constant it had been. I had mistaken that constant pressure for connection. Without it, my days felt unfamiliar, almost too quiet. My sister tried to hold on the longest. Her messages changed tone over time. The insults disappeared first, then the defensiveness. What replaced them was forced positivity. She sent a photo of her child painting at daycare, no caption attached, like it was supposed to soften something in me. A week later, she followed it with a longer message about how she had reflected and grown, how the whole situation had taught her a lot, how she hoped we could talk again someday. I read it carefully, then archived it. There was no acknowledgement of the recordings, no mention of the lies, no apology for trying to sabotage my career. Growth without accountability is just another form of denial. My brother disappeared faster. I heard through a mutual acquaintance that he was crashing on a friend's couch and trying to sell sneakers online to make rent. He never contacted me again after his lawsuit was dismissed. I think that was the moment it finally sank in for him. The free ride was over, and there was no version of this where intimidation worked anymore. My parents were the last to go quiet. My mother made one final attempt. A handwritten letter arrived in the mail, pages filled front and back. It started kind, almost too kind, and then slowly twisted into something else. She said she understood why I was upset, but insisted she never meant to exclude me. She framed everything as a misunderstanding, as families arguing the way families always do. Then she wrote the sentence that stayed with me longer than anything else. You were never supposed to take it so personally. I folded the letter and put it away. That sentence explained everything. They never expected me to feel hurt. They expected me to absorb it. My father never sent anything. No letter, no message. He blocked me on his phone, the same way someone does when they want to believe they're the one being wronged. In his world, I was the one who broke the rules by stopping. And maybe, to them, I did betray something. I stopped funding their lives. I stopped staying quiet. I stopped pretending the arrangement was love. I've heard through others that they still tell their version of the story, that I turned on them over a petty disagreement. That money changed me, that I became selfish, unstable, arrogant. What they never mention is the dinner where they laughed while excluding me from a trip I paid for. They don't talk about the lies, the sabotage, or the recordings. They don't say how they treated me like a credit card instead of a person. And that's fine. They can keep their story. I don't need to correct it. Because here's the truth. They thought I would never leave because I never had before. They thought they could humiliate me, use me, lie to me, and still keep my support. They believed forgiveness was automatic and my resources were permanent. They were wrong. We don't speak anymore. There are no calls, no birthdays, no forced holidays, no fake apologies, just space. Clean, empty space. And for the first time in my life, that space feels peaceful. My days are quieter now, not in a lonely way, but in a rested way. I wake up earlier because I want to. I cook real meals. I go for walks after work. I sleep through the night without my phone lighting up with someone else's emergency. My apartment feels different too. Bigger, lighter. I took down the old family photos I used to keep out of guilt and replaced them with places I've been and people who don't ask me to prove my worth with money. A few people in my life know the full story. When I tell it, their reactions are always the same. Some version of disbelief. I can't believe you went through that. But the truth is, I didn't just go through it. I lived it for years. I normalized it. I accepted it. Only now with distance can I see it clearly for what it was. Slow erosion. Love with invoices. Support with strings attached. I'm not bitter anymore. That part burned off somewhere along the way. What's left is clarity. They never saw me as a person, only a resource. And when I stopped being useful, they tried to punish me for it. But the beautiful thing about being done is that there's nothing left to lose. No more fixing what was never real. No more hoping they'll suddenly see me for who I am. I've deleted their numbers, blocked their emails, closed the last remaining doors they quietly depended on. It isn't revenge, it's reality. I've stopped trying to be the daughter, the sister, the provider they imagined. Now I'm just Barbara, and that's enough. Sometimes, out of habit, I reach for my phone like I should check in. Then I remember there's nothing left to check in on. Their absence doesn't ache anymore. It just feels quiet, like background noise that finally stopped.